Today's daf is daf Lametes, and we're going to start a Mirza Hashem where we left off in the previous year on daf Lametes Amid Beis. And the Gemara said lo pligi. And you'll see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom, lo pligi. There's no machlokus between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai with regard to ksuba. Beit Shammai concede that the ksuba is bechezkes yarshei habal. And that's because you cannot collect the ksuba during the lifetime of the Baal. She has no rights to the ksuba. And the Yavam now steps into the shoes of the Baal. So she can't collect the ksuba during the lifetime of the Yavam. Now, if she dies during the lifetime of the Yavam, she loses her ksuba, and her Yarshim do not have rights to collect the ksuba. The only machlok between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai, where we introduce the rights of the Yarshei Ha'av or the Yarshei Ha'isha, that's in regard to Nichsei Maluk. These are the nechasim that she brought into the marriage. So she has a chazaka and a yad on those nechasim. But as far as her ksuba is concerned, which she cannot collect until her husband dies, she died before her husband. Therefore, the ksuba, according to everybody, is bechezkas Baal, in this case, bechezkas Yavam, who stands in place of the Baal. So the Gemara asks the following kasha: below, is it really true that there's no machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai with regard to the ksuba? V'hak tani, our Mishnah says, Mesa, the Yevamot died before the Yibum took place, before she got chalitza. Ma yasa b'ksubasa u'b'nechasim ha'nechnasim v'yotzim ima. And the Mishnah uses one continuous phrase here, integrating ksuba with nichsei maluk, and recording machlokis on both ksuba and nichsei maluk. Beit Shammai omrim yachloku yorshei habal im yarshei ha'av, and Beis Hillel omrim nechasim b'chezkasam. So let's take a minute to go back a few pages here to the Mishnah, and it says here that Beit Shammai omrim yachloku yorshei habal im yarshei ha'av, Beis Hillel omrim nechasim b'chezkasam. This is in the Mishnah Daf Lameches Amud Aleph. Nechasim b'chezkasam, and therefore the ksuba is b'chezkas yarshei habal. And as far as nechasim hanichnosim v'yotzim ima, b'chezkas yarshei ha'av. So it seems that we have machlokas shin Beis Hillel Beit Shammai about the ksuba. Beit Shammai holds that the status of a shomeres yavam is that of a safek nesua, and she's almost like married to the yavam. And just like we have a din of Baal Yorishis Ishto, in this case, Safek Ishto, the Yavam also, who stands in place of the Baal, is Zocher, and he inherits. And it seems like he inherits certainly, the Yavam has rights, again, as we said before, at least halfway rights, because he's a Safek Nesua to the Yerusha of the Yevamot. So therefore, Beit Shammai insists that Yachloku Yorshei Habal and Yorshei Ha'av. And it seems from the language of the Mishnah that refers to Ksuba as well. So that Beit Shammai upgrade the status of Yorshei Ha'av vis-a-vis the ksuba, because the Yevama and the Yavam relationship is only a Safek Nesuin relationship. So in any event, it seems clearly that even with regard to Ksuba, Beit Shammai insists that we divide it between the Yorshei Abal and the Yorshei Av, which again, as we said before, upgrades the status of Yorshei Av. Because Beis Hillel would say, no, that the Ksuba is Bechezkas Yorshei Habal, correct? Nechasim Bechezkasam. Exactly. Ksuba Bechezkas Yorshei Habal. I mean, that's about as clear and as explicit as you can get. The Yorshei Av, according to Beis Hillel, have no rights. Don't upgrade them to have schus in the Ksuba. As far as the Chasim, Hayotzim, Yotzim Ima, that's already what she brought in, and that belongs to her, and therefore, after her death, that is inherited by the Yorshei Av. So the Gemara now answers the following. After kind of like split the Mishnah. Mesa, Mayasa Biksuvasa, and that's where we're going to stop. Shavka means, the Tana leaves that as an end and an independent statement on its own. And the assumption is going to be that clearly, even according to Beit Shammai, we cannot upgrade the Yorshei Ha'av here. In this case, it's purely Yorshei Ha'ba'al. And then, now we start again, Mayasa, which again, it doesn't say in our Mishnah, but that's how the Gemara is interpreting our Mishnah, and adding Mayasa b'nechasim yosim ima, and now the Mishnah introduces the Machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai, in regard to Nichsei Maluk, but only Nichsei Maluk. In regard to Nichsei, to the Ksuba, that's for sure, even according to Beis Shammai, b'chezkas Yorshei Ha'ba'al. As far as the Nichsei Maluk are concerned, here Beit Shammai upgrades the status of Yorshei Ha'ba'al, and whereas in Ksuba, he together with Beis Hillel upgraded the status. No, I'm sorry. That in Ksuba, Beit Shammai would agree that the Yorshei Ha'av are out of the picture. But Yorshei Ha'ba'al, in the case of Nichsei Maluk, Beit Shammai say Yachlok Yorshei Ha'ba'al and Yorshei Ha'av. In which case, with regard to Nichsei Maluk, we said that Beis Hillel hold Nechasim Bechezkasam, and we said pretty much straight from the Mishnah that means Bechezkas Yorshei Ha'av. Let's see it inside one more time. Yeah, Nechasim Ha'nechnasim Yotzim Ima is Bechezkas Yorshei Ha'av. So it's Beis Shammai who upgraded the status of Yorshei Ha'ba'al with regard to Nichsei Maluk. So Beit Shammai Om Yachlok Yorshei Ha'ba'al im Yorshei Ha'av, uBeis Hillel Omrim Nechasim Bechezkasam, which means Bechezkas Yorshei Ha'av. And then the Tana goes back to explain that the din of the Ksuba, according to Beis Hillel, and we'll see the Beit Shammai agree, according to this Gemara, that Ksuba Bechezkas Yorshei Ha'ba'al. And Beit Shammai will agree, we're not going to upgrade the Yorshei Ha'av. Beit Shammai, are going to upgrade with a chiddush here, upgrade the status of Yorshei Ha'ba'al with regard to Nechasim and Nechnasim. Amar Rav Ashi Masnisa Nami Deka. The Mishnah also would seem to indicate that there's no machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai with regard to Ksuba, and the Ksuba is inherited by Yorshei Ha'ba'al. The Katani says in the Mishnah, Beit Shammai Omer, Yachloku Yorshei Habal im Yorshei Ha'av, which means that we're going to give rights to the Yorshei Habal, just one second, let's just get this straight. The Katani Yachloku Yorshei Habal im Yorshei Ha'av, that's Beit Shammai, right? So we have to get the sequence right. Let's get it right. That the Nechasim until this point were in a chazaka of the Yorshei Ha'av. And now Beit Shammai is saying that the Yorshei Habal are going to, so to speak, grab away from the Yorshei Ha'av. And even the Yorshei Habal will get a chelek and divide up with the Yorshei Ha'av. And that's the Chiddush of Beit Shammai, which makes sense with regard to Nichsei Maluk. V'lo Ktani, it doesn't say Yachloku Yorshei Ha'av im Yorshei Habal, meaning that in Ksuba, which would be the appropriate language for Ksuba if Beit Shammai disagreed, even in the case of Ksuba, that the Yorshei Ha'av are grabbing something from the hands of the Yorshei Habal, but that it doesn't say. It says just the opposite, that the Yorshei Habal are sort of taking away from the chazak of the Yorshei Ha'av, and that's of course appropriate for the case of Nichsei Maluk. So we see from this that there's no machlokes to Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. As far as Ksuba, everybody agrees that the Ksuba is Becheskes Yorshei Habal. The only machlok is with regard to Nichsei Malug, and Beis Hillel see the Nichsei Malug Becheskas Yorshei Ha'av. So Beit Shammai, and they want to grant a certain yad to the Yorshei Habal, so that the Yorshei Habal are in effect taking away from the Chazaka from the Yorshei Ha'av. Okay. So now, at this point, we're going to sort of summarize a little bit what we learned yesterday. And the Gemara had asked the Kasha, what's the between the Reicha and the Seif of that Mishnah? Meaning, in the Reicha, Beit Shammai agree, they concede that she can sell these questionable possessions, and the sale is valid. And in the Seifa, where she died, there we have machlokas Beis Hillel Beit Shammai, and Beit Shammai hold yachloku in the case of Nichsei Malug, so that all of a sudden Beit Shammai are telling us that that the Yorshei Habal have a right to sort of block her ability to just dispense and sell and give away her possessions, her properties. Whereas in the Reisha, it was clear that Mocheres V'no Sedes V'Kayim, that she has, carte blanche, unlimited rights to sell the property. So the Gemara so far, let's just summarize this before we get to Abaye, had offered two answers to reconcile the Reisha and the Seif. The first answer was Ula. Ula said that the Reisha was talking about Nechasim that fell to her while she was a Shomeres Yavam Minha Erisin. The Sefer is talking about a case where she was a Shomeres Yavam Minha Nesuin. Right? We discussed yesterday Erisin Nesuin of the original Baal, who is no longer. Rav, on the other hand, gave an answer that in the Reicha she's alive, and she is a Vadai, he is a Suffolk, because again, Zikas Nesuin creates a Suffolk Nesuin, and we apply the principle of Ein Suffolk, Motzimidei Vadai. So that's the Reisha, according to Rabbah, that she's alive. and she's a vada and he's a suffer. The seifa is a case where she died. And both of the sides, whether it's Yoshi Bal Yoshi, Ha'av, come to fight over the Yerusha. Okay, Abai has a different mahal. Abai Omar Reisha did naflu lo kishehi shomeres yavam. That when her father died and his estate fell to her, to Yerusha, it was after her husband had already died. She was already at that stage a shomeres yavam. So her original husband had no schus, no monetary rights in the Yerusha Sa'av, because the Yerusha Sa'av fell to her after his death. And in this case, there's no machlokes, that the nechasim b'ches kasa, that she can sell the nechasim even lechatchila, because her husband, her late husband, had no schus whatsoever in these nechasim, since they fell for Yerusha after his death. Now, in an event that she died, her Yarshim will inherit the Nechasim, not the Yavam. The Yavam does not inherit a schus in his late brother's property. And even though she's Zekuka lo leyivam, however, Zika is not going to be relevant here, because he, the Yovam, is not zochet in the schus. He doesn't inherit the schus of the nechasim from his brother. And the Zika is not going to be powerful enough such that he, the Yovam, can now be koneh her nechasim that fall now, meaning during her state of shomeres Yovam. So the nechasim are b'chezkas sa. Safe, on the other hand, the naflu la k'shi tachtov de bala. So in the Sefer, her father died when she was married to the original husband. And in which case, if her husband is alive at the time of the Yerusha Sa'av, then he's zochet to the Nechasim. And therefore, when he dies, the Yavam is Yoresh Mimenu, he gains from his late brother, that's Chus. And here we have Machlok Speisil Beit Shammai. So Beit Shammai holds that the Yavam has a chelik in these Nechasim. And that's because Beit Shammai upgrade the status of a Yavam. And now we turn to Daf Lamed Tes. Kasavar Abaye, according to Abaye, the opinion of Beis Hillel, as far as a married woman is concerned, that's after Nisuin, is Yado ki Yada, which means Yad Shneim Shavim. His Yad is not more powerful than her Yad, even after marriage. So therefore, when her husband dies and she falls for Yibum to the Yavam, we always go down a Madrega, and the Yad Yavam is Grua, is on a lower level than the Yad of the Baal, because she's only Skukalo, she's not Nisualo, she's not married to him. And that means that at this point, whereas before, during the Chaya Abal, it was Shav B'Shav, it was equally on the scale in terms of his Yad and her Yad. Now, with his death and Zikas Yibum, her Yad becomes more powerful than his. That's called Yad Ha'isha, meaning a Yevama, Adifa Miyad Yavam. And therefore the Nechasim are in her Chazak. And if she dies while she's a Shomeres Yavam, then the Yarshei Ha'av will inherit her, not the Yarshei Ha'Baal. That's Beis Hillel. Beit Shammai hold that when a woman is Nesua in a regular full-fledged marriage relationship, it's the Yad HaBaal that's even more powerful than the Yad HaIsh. It's not Shava b'Shava. The Ikar Yad and the Adifus Hayad is that of the Baal. And he's Muchzak more than the Ish. Now he dies, she falls for Yibum. The Yad of the Oven, we said, is Grua, is one less of a notch down from the Yad HaBaal, because she's not Nesua to the Ovam, she's only Zkuka to the Ovam. And now the Yad HaYavam is equal to the Yad HaIsha. And that's Beit Shammai, who say, Yachloku Koach Shneim Shav. So when she dies, when she's a Yavama, a Shomeres Yavam, then the property is divided between the Yorshei Baal and the Yorshei. And again, these are nechasim that felt her, meaning the death of her father, when she was in a sewer. Amalei Rava. Rava turns to Abaye and he says the following: Eden nafle lok shehi tachtav de Baal. If her father died and the Yerusha felt her when she was married, kuliyamalo pligi the yodo adifa miyada. Not the way you said it, Abaye, that the yad shneim shava benachas. No, he, the Baal, has the adifus. He's the primary yad, and the Baal now becomes muchzak in lichsei maluk more than she is. And now, if the Baal dies and she falls for Yibum, the koach of the Yibum, as we said before, goes down one notch vis-a-vis the koach of the Baal. And therefore, since initially the Baal had the higher, more powerful yad, now at this point, after the death of the Yavam, it's Shava b'Shava, it's equal. His nases yodo ki yoda. Okay. So therefore, if she dies when she's a Shemeres Yavan, Beis Hillel will be moded, they'll concede to Beit Shammai that we have to divide equally between the Yorshei Baal and her Yorshin, because Yoda Shavel Yad Hayama. So whereas until the death of her husband, it was Yad Habal Al Helyona Adifa, now it becomes Shava b'Shava, and therefore Beis Hillel would agree Yachloku. Ella. So now, in interpreting our Mishnah, Rava is going to disagree with Abaye. We're not going to say like Abaye, and we're going to differentiate between Nafla Nechasim Kshei Haisa Nesua, Nafla Nechasim Kshei Shemeres Yavam, Idi v'Idu. The entire Mishnah Reish Sefer is Nafla Kishehi Shemeres Yavam. The father died, leaving his estate, and she is a Shemeres Yavam. The Baal Harishon has no zchus because he died before the father died. So the Yavam did not inherit anything, any zchus. What's the difference now between the Reish and the Mishnah? The Sefer, Reisha, Dilo Ovid B'Mayim. Here's where Rav introduced another element into the equation, which becomes the critical element, and that is Maim. So she fell for Yibum, And in the Resha, before the Yavam got a chance to do Maimar, her father died, and the Nechasim fell for Yerusha to Lo Avid Bey, Adayin Lo Avid Bey, Maimar. All we're left with is Zikas Yibum, and Zika doesn't have the power to give the Yavam a schus in the Nechasim. And therefore, if she dies while she's a Shmeres Yavam, everybody agrees that the Yarshei Baal do not have any chelik in her Nechasim, because that Zika is not enough to create a din of Baal. And the Yavam has no schus in the Nechasim. But in the Sefer, here we're going to have Machlokas Beis Hillel Beit. The Ovid Ba Maimar. Her father died and the Nechasim fell for Yerusha only after the Yavam did a Maimar. Now you could imagine that the rights of the Yavam now are a result of Maimar. And after he did a Maimar, he's like married to the Yevama. Now the Nechasim fall from the father, and Beit Shammai hold that Maimar is Kodim in Torah. This was the Gemara back on Daf Chav Tes. And now she's considered Eishes HaYavam. And the Yavam now has Nechasim, just like the Baal, the original husband. And therefore Beit Shammai holds Yachloku. Again, the Gemara is going to explain Yachloku in just a minute. You know why they have to give up half of the Yorchei Ha'av, the Yorchei Ha'isha. And Beis Hillel disagree. They hold that Maimar is not Konim in Torah, and the Maimar that the Yavam did in his Yevama will not add his chus in her Nechasim. The Nechasim remain Bechezkas Ha'isha Bilvad. Ukesava Rava. Now the Gemara wants to ask, why is it that according to Beis Shammai we split the Yerusha? Kasava Rava, with regard to Kedushay Maimar, Li Beit Shammai, it's not Kona Legamre Min Torah, not a complete total kinyan, but Maimar's Oser Badai Arusa B'Safek Nisua. So Maimar makes this Yibum or Zika, this relation between the Yavam and the Yevama into one of a Vade Arusa, but Safek Nesua. So it means that even though Maimar is Konim in Torah, and she's definitely considered married to him, but that's only at the level of Arusasa. I mean, no one else could marry her. She's an Eishes Ish. But it's not considered Vade Nesuasa, such that now the Yavam should inherit all the Nechasim from her farm. But rather it's a Safek Nesua. And the Gemara explains that Vade Arusa, to what extent do we consider our Vade Arusa, Meinaf Kamina Lidchos Bitsara? That was the Gemara back on Chav Tes, that according to Beit Shammai, if the Yavam was Mekadesh, the Yavam of the Ketushay Maimar, the Achakach, subsequently, Nafla Achosa, Shahoisa Nesua Li'ach, Lifnei Hayibum, Lifnei Hayavam. So let's say the Yavam was Mekadesh, the Yavam B'Ketushay Maimar. Then her sister, meaning the sister of this Yevama, who's married to one of the other brothers, who dies, and now she falls for Yibum. So what's the deal over here? You have the second achos, but on the first achos he made a maimar. Is this second achos that falls for Yibum from, again, a different brother, is Asura Olam Midin Achos Isha. And therefore, as an achos isha, there's no zika whatsoever. And therefore, even ishto chosava maimar is ena asura olav midin achos kukaso, because we're going to upgrade the status of maimar to that of, according to Beit Shammai, right, to that of a kinyan, like as if he's married, such that now we have to exclude that whole wing of the other sister's married to another brother. Forget about that. That's not shayach, because we're talking about, the Yavam who did a maimar in the Yevama, and now she's like ki'ilu married to him, according to Beit Shammai. Ukesafek nesua lachlok b'nechas. And his maimar that he did with this Yevama is considered like a safek nesua lachlok b'nechasin. So when she dies, he, the Yavam, is not yorish the entire estate. So again, Kishemesa Eino Yoresh as Kol Nechaseha, Sha'af Shemaimer Osa Kinyan Eris Invadim, Mikom Kom Elu Bal Yad Benichse Arusaso. Right, so now we're talking about monetary law, and in monetary law, he's only an Arusa with a suffix Nesua. And therefore, since you don't have in Maimer an Nesu in Vadai, the Yavam cannot take the Nechasin. All right, it's like a suffix Nesua, and therefore, Yachloku. Itmar Mishmei Rab Losa Kavasi the Rava, the Itmar Mishmei Rab Yosi, Rab Chanina Kavasi the Bait. Much later, we're going to switch around. So Gemara says, Umi Omer Rab Loza Hachi. Does Rabbi Elazar actually interpret our Mishnah the way Rava interprets the Mishnah, which is what you said now? That Maimer is konol by Shammai lasso sofik nesua lirash nechaseha of Omar Rabbi Elazar Maimer lebeit Shammai eno kona el lidchos tsara bilvan. So you want to tell me that Rabbi Elazar interprets that Mishnah like Rava? So how are you going to explain that Maimar lebeit Shammai eno kona el lidchos b'tzar bilvan? Right, you're putting all the emphasis on, Rabbi Elazar, on Beit Shammai's shita that Maimar is a kinyan, but Rabbi Elazar himself said that Maimar lebeit Shammai eno kona el inyan lidchos b'tzar bilvan. And according to this opinion, Beit Shammai doesn't darshan any orish klalas nechaseh she'ein Maimar kona linyan zeh. A Maimar nechshav l'kiddushin rak le'inyan shu docha zikas achosa shenofels lefana. And that's it. That's what Maimar does. So the Maimar could not make the Yevama could be considered like an Isua. So according to this opinion in Beit Shammai, is Eino Yorish Klalas Nechaseha. The Yavam cannot be Yorish at all in Nechasim because Ein Maimar Kodolinian Zeh. So first of all, it says Epuch. You're going to have to switch it around, and Rebbe Elazar holds like Abaye Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina like Rava. But Ibais Ema, Liolam Lo Tepach, I don't have to switch around the Amalcha Rabbi Lazar, Mi Amri Anah. When I said that Ein Mamar Kona B'Yavama, that was only except for Luchos Satsara, I didn't have the intent, I didn't have the meaning or intend that only Le'inyan Zeh, only Luchos Satsara. Rather, my kavana was that Ein Mamar Kona B'Yavama. So what does Ein Maimer Konig mean now? It's not a full-fledged Ishus. You wouldn't say Harehi Gito because Lekol Dover based on Maimar, and therefore Lo Sagi Lo Beget, she'll need Chalitza in addition to Get. And all this is because Maimar is not considered a Kinyan Gomur, and she's not considered Miu, what's the word I want to use? Knuya. She's not considered Knuya Lo Ke'ishta. Ela de boy nami chalitz. The Gemara says it explicitly. However, lachlok b'nichsei lo kani. Miyami, did I ever say, ask Rabbi Lazar, a rhetorical question, that as a result of Maimar, the Yovam won't be kona any schus to get to expand his chelik in the Yerusha? Miyami, did I say such a thing? I also agree that the Yovam has a certain schus in the Nechasim, which will be clinched by Maimon. Hence Yachlok. Omar Papa, diyuka de masnisin kavasi dabai. The Mishnah is more meduyak according to Abaye, who says that in the Sefer, the Nechasim felt her when she was Tachas Baila, who died, and she fell for Yibum. On that, there was machlokes between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. Im kshahaisa nesua yado ki yada, o shiyado adifal yada. That's the machlokes between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. Whether you square off and you equalize yado ki yada, or should we say that his yad is adifa? The afal gav the kasha mesa. According to Abaye, we don't understand why the Mishnah had to formulate this whole case in a misa situation. I was going to explain this. The katani, nechasim and nechnasim v'yotzim imo. We're talking about nechsei malug, and the Gemara is like my nechasim. Where do they go in and where do they go out? My nechnasim umay yotzim, and where do they come from? Lav. Shouldn't we interpret the Mishnah, the Kavanas of Mishnah, that at the beginning nechnasim l'shusabal, when nechasim accrue, they fall into the possession of the Isha, now the Baal takes over, because that's the nature of Nisuin. And the Baal has chusin on nechasim. V'yotzim, and with the death of the Baal, and she falls in front of the Yavam for Yibum, is Mirshus HaBaal, Yotzim Mirshus HaBaal, V'nichnasim Mirshus HaA. So this is Meduyak. This makes sense according to Abaye's explanation that her father died and the Chasam felt her when she was Tachas Paila. But, says Rav Papa, the Afal Gav the Kasha Mesa. According to Abai, we don't understand Adam miflagi begufa uliachamisa liflagu b'chayea leperos. Why is the machlokas formulated between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai formulated as whether the Baal is Yorish? The Yorsha Baal, they get the chelik begufa shel karka. And after the Misa of the Shomer's Yavam, we could have had a machlokas where the Yorsha Baal could inherit b'chayea shel Yevamot. Does the Yavam have schusim l'achilas peros? And we should have a machlokas formulated in the Mishnah according to Abaye of b'chayea, where the Yorshei Abal take a chelek b'chayea of the Yevamot. Is there a schus? And also, is there a schus to the Yavam to reap the harvest of these nechasim? According to Beit Shammai, yado shel Yavam ki yada, and therefore yachloku hayavam v'yavama es hapeperos. Whatever she, the late so and so left behind her, we'll take it all. And the Gemara says, "V'sulo mid." No, it says a diuk to support Abaye, and don't reject this diuk, even though you have a kasha. Why didn't they argue in a? Why did they have to introduce the argument in the case of Misa? But nevertheless, we still have a diuk in the Mishnah to support Abaye. Now the Mishnah says, "Knasa harei ki ishtal chol davar l'may hilchasa." Rabbi Yossi Baruch Hanina l'magarsha beget. She doesn't need chalitza. Umachzira. And if he wants to remarry her, and she hasn't been married to anyone else, he's allowed to do so. The Gemara right away asks, Megarsha beget? Shita? And he was Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum by marrying her. For sure, she needs a get, no chalitza. Salka Dait Kamina says the Gemara is an answer. I would have thought if he's Megarsha beget, she still needs chalitza. And why is that? What would be the havamina that in addition to get she needs chalitza after he was Mekayim in the midst of Yibum? Hoel uksiv says in the Torah Yevamot Yavo Leh Ulkacha Lo Lishavi Yivma. So the language of the pasuk Amar Rachmana implies that even after Kansa, she still has the Shem Yevama. Because it says V'yibma, which means Hadayin Yibume Arishon Aleh. Is there for B'chalitza in Beget low means get is not enough independently to be matter to get married, and in order to get a hetel shuk, we need chalitza. Mashmalan, next for the time it says Harehi Kishto Chol Davar, and after he's kones her, she's no longer considered a Yevama, and she's muteris l'shuk. Now, Rabbi Yotzi Reb Chanina says that the Tana wants to teach us that after Gerushin, the Yavam, she's not necessarily Olav Machzira, he can remarry her. So the Gemara says, what's going on in Pshita? Any man who divorced his wife is allowed to remarry her. Salket, I would have thought, mitzvah shel ula kachalo lisha derami rachman alei of the Torah imposed upon him this mitzvah, and he fulfilled it, is hashta tekum alei the Iser Eishes Ach. So now after he's Mekayim his mitzvah, we would have had a Havamina, Tekum Ale B'Yisrael Ach. Meaning the Torah was only Mata Shach L'Tzorach Mitzvahs Mibu. But after he divorces her, and either he did or he didn't fulfill the mitzvah, meaning after the Gerushin, he was Mekayim the mitzvah, is I would have suggested that the Torah would not be mater him because she's basically Achos Ishto. The Torah was mater him, I'm sorry, Eishes Ach, I meant to say. The Torah is matter the Yisrael of Eishes Ach for the sake of the mitzvah. He was already Mekayim the mitzvah. Now he divorces her, and now he wants to remarry her. The Yisrael Erev of Eishes Ach is Chos V'nir, so to speak. So Gemara says, maybe that logic is correct. How do we know it's not so? And the Torah adds the extra word li'isha, which could have been deleted. It could have said v'lokcha lo v'yidma. It says li'isha, kevan shelakacha, harei ki'ish tol chodav. So the word li'isha is telling me that she's an ishal chaldavar, meaning she doesn't require chalitza. He's megarish beget, he doesn't give a chalitza, and so forth. And he could also remarry her after this divorce. The Torah says v'yidma. It's not coming to teach us that she's still called the Yevamot. The Rabbanan who malamed sheyochel liyaba bal karcha, u'lerevi malamed li'isa tzaras erev. So that's the sugya of Yevamot. Now the Mishnah says u'bilvad shetehek suba sal nichsei baila rishon she'ein hayavam chayav v'ksubas yevimto min nechasav rashay lemochram k'sheyirtze b'lo l'shayir b'hem nechasav shibutchabam l'ksuba v'ein ksubas hayavama el min nichsei bala shemes. He left over nechasim, they're meshubadim for ksuba, and the yavam cannot sell them. So the Gemara asks my timer, what's the reason that the nichsei ayova are not meshubadim l'ksuba? And the answer is isha hiknu lo min shamayim. He did not enter into this relationship because he wanted to. He was obliged, or he was fulfilling his mitzvah by doing the yibum, and that's called hiknu shamayim. And therefore, he's not mishubad to pay her ksuba, or to designate nechasim for the payment of a ksuba, and therefore he's free to sell his nechasim when he wants to. And the Gemara adds v'lesla min harishon. What's going to be? The Yavam is married to her, she has no ksuba. So let's say, for example, her first husband died and didn't leave any nechas. Is takinula, the chacham should be metakin for the Yevama, a ksuba min hashenim. So you have to, in a case where there are no nechasim from the previous husband who died, then we're going to require the new husband, the Yavam, to give her a ksu. The Mishnah says mitzvah begadol liyab, which might mean the oldest of the brothers or the bachar. And it says in the pasuk, in the parsha of Yibum, in Kitei, it says Vaya bachar sheteleid yakum al shem achiv hames. And this teaches us that the mitzvah is on the firstborn, or the oldest of the Achim. he gets first dibs to be miyabim. He's called a bechor in this post. Lo ratzov, the Gadol Achim says, I'm out of here. Demurs, he doesn't want to fulfill the mitzvah of Yibum. Is mehalchim al kol ha'achim. Bezdin will go around to the other brothers and ask them if they have a ratzon to be miyabim. If they all fit the same bill over and over again, lo ratzu, so now the Bezdin goes to one brother or another, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, such. Each one says, no, I'm not interested. Sounds like the Matan Torah business. Okay, anyway. It's Choser Eisal Gadol. Now we're going to force the God. So as long as when the Gadol refuses initially and there are still other options, then the Gadol is okay, so to speak. It's protected. And we don't have to beat him blue, but black and blue. But if all the other brothers reject it, they don't want Yibum, then it goes back, the ball bounces back into the court of the Yavam, meaning of the Bechor, and Omrim Lo, they'll say to him, Alecha mitzvah. And again, what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah has two options. O choletz, o yabim. Those are your two options. Now, if he still refuses for chalitza and yibum, and tola be'achiv hakatan, he gives the explanation that the reason why he doesn't want to give a chalitza is because let's wait for my younger brother, who's now a katan, and sheyagdil till he becomes a gadol. Maybe he'll want to be miyabed. So now we have one side to say that that's a good argument. Let's see what happens when the katan becomes a gadol. Oh, shehu gadol ha'achim animtzu f'nei v'yesh lo ach gadol yosef she'enu kan. He has an older brother, and he says the reason why I don't want to give Yibum is he's told it ba'achiv ha'gadol. Let's wait. The oldest brother is out there in the seven seas. Let's wait till he comes back. Oh, he has a brother who's not a katan, but he's a cheresh shoten. He says, let's wait and see if he'll get healthy. And then maybe he'll be willing to be miyab. Is in all these cases ain't shomal. We don't listen to the gadol ha'achim, who's right here. And he's got the choice of chalitza or yibum. Olecha mitzvah chalotz o yab. So that's the mission. Now, when it says the mitzvahs on the gadol ha'achim, is it mean liyabim? And his yibum, his bia comes first. If he doesn't want to be miyabim, but rather lachlots, then let's go to one of the other brothers and try to get a yibum from them, because bias ach acher adifa michalitzas hagadol. What do we say? No, the gadol achim is kodem lakol, bein lechalitza, bein liyibum. The gadol wants to give chalitza, he is kodem even lebias hakot. And Itmar, we learned that bias katan, here we don't mean a katan that he's less than 13, but rather he's not the gadol sheba'achim, the chalitzas gadol. And the other possibility is to press the gadol to do chalitza. He's not interested in yibum. Which is better? Which is preferable? Should we go for chalitzas hagadol or bias hakatan? And intuitively, we would have said, let's go for bias hakatan. But pligi ba Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chad Amar bias katan adifa, which is intuitively correct. We'd rather get some yibum actually going on. Echad Amar no, chalitzas hagol adifa. The Gemara explains. Man the Omer bias katan adifa da ikar mitzvah biyibu. That's the nature of this mitzvah. It's yibu. Chalitza is only a fallback position. She doesn't want to be miyab. So since there's a possibility of yibu, then be a kodemes. So this we understand. Chalitza is in a no-win situation. But if we have a possibility of waiting, of turning to the katan, meaning the younger brother, and he'll do yibum, that's for sure adifa. Mandiyam chalitzas gadol adifa, and the answer is b'makom gadol bias katan lav klum. Very extreme, revolutionary statement. The mitzvah's on the gadol. It says v'ayah b'char. And that mitzvah splits and bifurcates. He has chalitza, he has yibum, chalitza. Bias katan right now is not in the picture. The mitzvah is on the gadol shabach. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Maybe we can answer up this question and prove that bias katan adifa lo rata. If the gadol doesn't want to do yibum, machzirin al kolachim, will check out the other brothers. My love, certainly the Mishnah has in mind lo rata liyabim elo lachlos. So he was quiet, in waiting, so to speak, to see what would happen. And machzirin al kol achim. K'tonim ahalchin eitzel ha'achim. Ushma mino bias katan adifa. Lo. Verse there's no proof from our Mishnah. What does it mean when it says in the Mishnah that the gadol lo rotza lachlot v'lo liyabe? If the gadol refuses chalitza, again, it's not clear why he refused chalitza. Maybe because she spits, in front of him. And he's like, oh, you rejected and you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. It said she wants to avoid all that discomfiture. So then, in such a case, the Mishnah says, Chosron al kol ha'ach. But if the gadol, in fact, does want to give chalitza, then it's very possible that we're not going to run around looking for other achim, because chalitza's gadol adif al bias katan. So the Gemara now asks the following kasha: if lo rotza means lo rotza lachlots below liyabim, is the kavase which means bidomelo. So what's bidomelo in the next part of the Mishnah? Legabi achim lo rotzu chosum eitzel gadol. It means lo rotzu lo lachlot v'lo liyabim. So it means nobody, not the gadol and not the other brothers, then none of them are interested, neither in chalitza nor in yibum. So let's clarify that. Amai chosrin bezdin eitzel gadol l'michveh. That we go back to the gadol in order to force the gadol to be miyabnim or lachlo. So again, it would make sense if we said that lo rotza means lo rotza liyabnim el lachlos, and also v'cheina achim shelo rotza liyabnim el lachlos. So now I understand why it's chozer liacha gadol shiachlos. Because if all the achim are out of here, they're all equally, saying no, no, no. They don't. they don't want Yibum, then we go back to the Achim. But if the interpretation of the Mishnah is that the Gadol and the other Achim are not interested neither in Chalitza nor in Yibum, so why are we being Matriach to Bezdin to go back to the Acha Gadol and force him when the Bezdin asks the other Achim and they say they don't refuse it? Lifei Dili Day. Why not force? Why shouldn't Bezdin force the other Achim to Mekayim the mitzvah of either Chalitza or Yibum? So the Gemara answers, Kevan the mitzvah le didei ramya le didei kaifina, because the Iker mitzvah is incumbent upon the Acha Gadol. And therefore, if every one of the Achim refuses to come step up to the plate, then le didei kaifina, we're going to force him to be Mekayim this mitzvah, not the other Achim. We only went to the other Achim as a default. Now, according to that man, the Yomi bias katan adifa michalitzas gadol. Tnaim, our Mishnah says if the gadol achim is not interested in yibum and tola bekatan, and he gives the explanation that he doesn't want to because there's another brother, younger brother, and he says, why don't we wait ad sheyagdil? Ain't shomin lo. We don't listen to him. So the Gemara asks him, ibias katan adifa, my ain't shomin lo. Why shouldn't we listen to his request to wait until the cotton becomes old enough and he decides whether, maybe he wants to be miyabim and a bias cotton is adifa, nintar dilma gadol miyabim. Maybe he'll become a gadol and he'll want to give yibum. So we see clearly that bias cotton is not adifa al chalitzas gadol. So the Gemara now rejects the kasha according to the way you understood it, that chalitzas gadol is adifa, and even though there's a possibility of fulfilling the mitzvah of yibum in a more perfect way through yibum mamish lakim shem zer al yachid, is nevertheless we have to wait. Like sheyeshev shoras last mitzvah both in yosef tov yesh lanu lahamtit. So why does the Mishnah say "B'gadol ad sheyavam imdina sayam ain't shomin lo amai nintar dilmasi v'cholitz"? Not sure why he says cholitz over here. He says in the name of the Rashba, "Nokat shem yavam v'yachlot so misha'afim yavam v'yachlot tishem kolshkenim rotze liyamim." Okay. Ella, therefore, we should certainly assume that the reason why we're not going to wait until the gadol comes back from Medina Sayyam is because Kol Shiuei Mitzvah Lo Shahinan. We don't want to delay the mitzvah. If it's possible to fulfill the mitzvah now, we're not going to postpone the mitzvah. And therefore, even if I were to grant you that Bias Katan is Adifa, and therefore you're asking me why don't we wait until he becomes a gadol? And she who a mitzvah lo mashhinon. The reason why we don't wait for him to come from Medina Sayyam is because we don't want to delay the mitzvah. And this leads us to Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis.